Welcome to Chapter 3, Section 1, Homework Help. I'm going to go through a couple of problems from your homework, help you get them set up, and do an example here for you. Let's start on page 170 with number 1. And in number 1, we're given the function f of x is equal to 1/2 x squared. Okay, and we're told to find that in this first part, we want to find the secant line between the points x equals 3 and x equals 4. And so in order to find the secant line, we need to find the slope of the secant line first. Well, that's going to happen by taking our change in y over the change in x, evaluated at these 2 points of x equals 3 and x equals 4. So we can find our slope simply by saying the slope is equal to, well, when we put in 4, f of 4, we get 4 squared is 16, half of that is 8. And then we want to subtract f of 3. Well, f of 3 is 3 squared is 9. That gives us 9/2. And we want to take all of that over the difference of these two, which is just simply 1. All right, well, that gives us a slope. Well, 8 minus 9/2, 8 is 16/2. Subtract that, we get a slope of 7/2. Now, this just tells us the slope of the secant line. What we're actually looking for is what is the equation for the secant line that goes through the points of f between x equals 3 and x equals 4. So we have to resort back to some Algebra 1, knowing that when we have the slope, we need to have a point. So let's just use the point that we had earlier of 4, 8. So if we have a point of 4, 8 and a slope of 7/2, we can just write the equation in point slope form of y minus 8 equals 7/2 times the quantity x minus 4. And to be honest, that is perfectly fine. Leave it in point slope form. You don't need to change it into slope intercept. Don't need to change it into standard form. Leave it in point slope form. That is the part A of number 1. Now this is talking about number 1, part A. Now in part B, what we're looking at here is we want to find the slope of the tangent line at that same x value of x equals 3. So we still have the same function, f of x equals 1/2 x squared, and we want to know at x equals 3, what is the slope of our tangent line? And then eventually, what is the equation of our tangent line? So let's find the slope first. And let's go back to our equation of the slope of a tangent line is the limit of f of x plus h minus f of x over h as h approaches 0. So our slope of our tangent line here is going to equal the limit as h approaches 0 of f of 3 plus h minus f of 3 all over h. And so remember, f of 3 plus h we put in here, so we square it, and what that gives us is we're going to get a limit as h approaches 0. We get a 1/2 out front, and inside there we get a 9 plus 6h plus h squared, and minus, well, f of 3 we already know is 3 squared is 9, and a half of that is 9/2. And all of that is over h. Now, when we distribute this 1/2, that 1/2 times 9 gives us 9/2, so that cancels with this 9/2, and the h cancels with that h and one of those h's, so what we're left with is the limit as h approaches 0 of 1/2 times 6, which is 3, plus 1/2 times h, which is h over 2. Now, as h approaches 0, that approaches 0, so we're left with simply 3. Now, what does this 3 tell us? That tells us the slope of the tangent line at that point. How do we write the equation of the line? Well, use our Algebra 1, and we can write the equation of the line in point slope form. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. Let's look at number 3. And number 3 is very similar to number 4, which I asked you to do from the other video. Number 1 is very similar to number 2. So let's take a look at number 3 because it deals with a slightly different function. It gives us f of x is equal 1 over x. And we're asked to find the secant line that joins the 2 points at where the function is defined at x equal to 2 and x equal to 3. And so we once again use the same secant equation that we had before, and we find the slope by saying that the slope of the secant line is going to equal f of 3 minus f of 2 all over 3 minus 2. Now, f of 3 is putting in 3, so we get 1/3, minus f of 2 is 1/2 all over 1. Now, if you look at this, we've got to get a common denominator here. 1/3 is simply 2 over 6, and this is 3 over 6, and we subtract, we get a negative 1 over 6. So that is our slope of our secant line. And to write the equation, well, let's just pick one of the points. We can pick the 2 1/2, and we can say that y minus 1/2 is equal to a negative 1/6 times the quantity x minus 2. And that is the equation of the secant line. Okay, pretty straightforward. Now, where it gets a little more tricky is when we want to try to find the tangent line as in part B. To find the slope, we need to evaluate the same limit we did in number 1. Now remember, our function f of x is equal to 1 over x, and we're looking at the point where x equals 2. Okay, so we want to know what's the slope of our tangent line at x equal to 2. Well, that's going to happen when the limit as h approaches 0 of f of 2 plus h minus f of 2 over h is evaluated when h approaches 0. So let's plug in some things here. This is 1 over 2 plus h minus 1 over 2 all over h. Now, we're going to need a little bit of algebra here to redo this and get a common denominator. When you find the common denominator, which in this case, the common denominator is simply going to be the quantity 2 plus h times 2, and you simplify and this h goes into the same denominator that you have up top, you're going to get the limit as h approaches 0 of 2 minus the quantity 2 plus h all over 2h times the quantity 2 plus h. Okay, now at this point we want to look at, well, how can we simplify this? When we distribute the negative, the 2 minus the 2 cancels out, and we're just left with a minus h in the numerator. So we get a minus h up top, and in the bottom we get 2h, 2 plus h in parentheses here. And we notice the h's cancel, which is nice. So then we're left the limit as h approaches 0 of negative 1 over 2 times the quantity 2 plus h. And as h approaches 0, that goes to 0. 2 times 2 is 4, and we get a negative 1/4. This right here tells us the slope of the tangent, and therefore we can go on to, once again, write our equation of the tangent line at that point, using our slope and using our point 2 1/2. Well, that about does it for number 1 and number 3. And you may notice that I skipped over section C, or part C, for both of those problems. In part C, they ask you to sketch a graph with the secant and tangent. I'm really not all that worried about that part. So even when you do number 2 and 4 tonight for homework, don't worry about doing part C. Just do part A and B, where you write the equation. Make sure you write the full equation of the secant line and write the full equation of the tangent line for the given x values. Give number 2 and 4 a shot from page 170 and 171, and come in tomorrow with any questions.